The story takes place on a future day when interdimensional monsters invade Earth, turning the last pure lands of the apocalypse into a living hell. In this shattered world, people struggle to survive. This is this year's latest monster blockbuster, Worldbreaker. A rift suddenly appears between reality and another world, and hordes of otherworldly monsters flood into Earth. People call them Worldbreakers. They are born with an instinct for destruction. Wherever they go, cities are reduced to ruins, and human homes are recklessly trampled. Even worse, under the erosion of a virus, some humans mutate into grotesque monsters. Faced with this sudden catastrophe, humanity chooses to unite and defend against the enemy together. However, the military is soon defeated retreat after retreat, and survivors are forced to flee for their lives. Yet, there are still those who refuse to give up, and Commander Willa is one of them. She leads a team deep into the battlefield, engaging in fierce slaughter with the otherworldly monsters. However, 15 years have passed, and that eerie rift still exists, and the battle between humans and these monsters has never ceased. During this time, Willa and her husband Luke built a family and gave birth to a child named Willa. When Willa rushes to the battlefield, Luke tells his daughter stories about the war. His emotional storytelling always fascinates Willa. Those fearless human heroes and the hard-won victories of the military are the hope and motivation for survivors to live on, and they inspire the soldiers to keep fighting. This day happens to be Willa's birthday. The busy Willa rushes back from the front lines, specifically to braid her daughter's hair beautifully. The couple has also prepared gifts. Willa gives a woolen hat, while Luke gives a cute plush puppy. Regrettably, born in the apocalypse, Willa has never seen other animals, so she curiously asks her father about it.
What is it?
That's a dog.
Maybe someday we'll find you a real one.
But just as the family of three is immersed in a warm atmosphere, the anxious urging of soldiers suddenly comes from outside the door. It turns out that a large group of monsters is rapidly approaching the camp, and, according to the latest intelligence, humanity's last line of defense is falling. The group can no longer cling to a moment of stability and makes a hasty decision to abandon the camp. Urged by her father, Willa quickly packs her necessities and follows the evacuation troops onto a truck. Willa, however, chooses to return to the battlefield, leading the remaining 15 soldiers to buy time for the civilians. Just like that, the family of three is separated once again. Willa knows this is her mother's mission, but she still cannot accept it in her heart. After all, in this cruel apocalypse, every parting could be the last. The shadow of war presses closer step by step, and the atmosphere inside the truck is oppressive and heavy. To dispel the lingering gloom, someone suddenly brings up the deeds of the legendary leader, Kodiak. He was the first commander of the human alliance, and the first to understand the weaknesses of these terrible creatures. One only needs to sever their heads to end their lives completely. But the mutated humans are much trickier to deal with. The brainstem must be destroyed to stop them. More people join the conversation, and the solemn atmosphere in the vehicle gradually relaxes. Some even start arguing about exactly how many monsters Kodiak killed. However, just then, a burst of intense gunfire explodes in their ears. Everyone rushes off the truck, only to see a horrific scene. Amidst the chaos, Luke takes Willa and hides under the truck, but they never expected that a monster would discover them. Just as Willa is filled with despair and ready to face death, a pair of combat boots suddenly appears in front of her eyes, followed by the monster's head falling to the ground. It turns out Willa arrived in time with her team. Seeing her mother, Willa is immediately surrounded by a sense of security. She hurriedly scrambles out from beneath the truck, but the moment she stands up, she spots a monster with its tentacles still writhing. This is Willa's first time coming face to face with an otherworldly creature. However, before she can react, she is ushered by her parents away from the road and into the woods, because these are just the monster's vanguard troops. With the truck severely damaged, staying put would be sitting ducks. After running for an unknown amount of time, the group finally stops at a safe place. By the flickering light of distant fires, Luke is surprised to find unidentified blood on Milla's face. He looks at his wife nervously, but fortunately, after Milla's careful identification, it is just ordinary human blood. In the confusion, she doesn't notice that Luke's expression remains extremely tense. At this moment, a soldier reports that they are only 4 kilometers from the nearest camp. Hearing this, Milla asks her husband to take the others and evacuate first, while she stays behind with the remaining soldiers to cover the rear. Seeing her daughter's tear-streaked face, Milla softened her tone and gently reminded her.
Listen to me. We're gonna make it through that. You can be afraid, but you can't let it stop you.
Although her heart is reluctant to part, and her daughter's tears pierce her heart, Milla steels herself to say goodbye to Willa because, as a commander, she must be responsible for all survivors. However, right then, the roar of monsters comes from behind them. The main force of the interdimensional monsters is close at hand. Milla cares about nothing else and hurriedly urges Luke to take their daughter and leave while she grips her weapon tightly, turning fearlessly to face the battle. However, what Milla doesn't know is that Luke does not follow the main group to evacuate. Instead, he takes Willa toward the seaside. The continent has been gradually falling, and there are few habitats left for human survival. Luke knows deep down that Milla's chances are slim, so he decides to try his luck at the sea. It turns out that, before the apocalypse, he owned a fishing boat used for deep-sea fishing. Luckily, the boat is still intact. Luke makes a prompt decision to pilot this small boat and take his daughter to a remote small island. Since the monsters cannot swim yet, perhaps they can spend the rest of their lives peacefully on the island. Just as the father and daughter are about to leave, a faint cry for help suddenly reaches their ears. Willa wants to go help, as the fishing boat looks big enough for more than 2 people, but she is sternly stopped by Luke. He knows the cruelty of the apocalypse too well. In this environment, sometimes the human heart is more terrifying than monsters. It is hard enough to look after themselves, and blind compassion is often the fastest way to die. Unexpectedly, as soon as his voice fades, a strange man rushes out of the woods. Seeing him press closer step by step, Luke quickly lies that he is just looking for food, trying to hide his intention to escape by boat. But unexpectedly, the man pulls out a pistol directly, forcing Luke to take him along. For his daughter's safety, Luke has to compromise in a panic. But then, the man suddenly turns to keep watch, revealing a wound on his back. Luke immediately has an idea. The next second, he feigns a helpless sigh, claiming the boat is out of gas and they need to find abandoned vehicles to siphon some fuel before setting sail. He wants to use this to stall the other party. The man indeed relaxes his vigilance and follows Luke to find vehicles, but the gun in his hand is never lowered. Fortunately, Luke has some combat skills. Taking advantage of the moment the man looks around nervously, he quickly pulls a dagger from his pocket and eliminates the threat. Meanwhile, Willa obediently waits right where she was told, but the intermittent roars of monsters keep tugging at her tightly wound nerves. Fortunately, her father finally runs out of the woods. Before Willa can ask what happened, Luke frantically unties the ropes securing the boat and urges her to help push it into the water. Just like that, the fishing boat cuts through the water, creating ripples as it speeds toward a distant, uninhabited island. The blue seawater beats against the reefs, and emerald vegetation covers the coast. The picturesque scenery gradually relaxes Willa's mood. Regrettably, resources here are extremely scarce, so even after the apocalypse broke out, no one was willing to establish a camp here. Luke could only build some basic living facilities by hand and laid a row of landmines along the shore, both to defend against monsters that might land and to guard against human intruders. Time passes quietly amidst calm and unease, and in the blink of an eye, a year goes by. The war on the opposite shore never stops, and Willa is always concerned about her mother, praying she is still alive. Aside from maintaining the traps every day, Luke never stops training Willa. He knows he will leave his daughter one day, and only by making her possess strong enough survival skills can she live on in this chaotic world. In the day-after-day training, Willa masters the use of various weapons, and her fighting skills improve daily. She has become an all-around warrior. That night, Willa again pesters her father to tell the story of Kodiak, the first person to discover the rift who killed the first otherworldly creature to land on Earth with only an axe. But after listening to the story this time, Willa has a different feeling, because she suddenly realizes that her father is too familiar with the details of the story, and she can't help but ask about it.
He's not you.
Willa?
Oh, it sounds like you. Strong, powerful, good to the max.
However, Luke does not answer directly, only telling Willa never to forget Kodiak's deeds and never to lose hope, because he believes that one day the world will return to its original state and be full of life again. These words take root in Willa's heart like a seed, giving her the courage to live on. After that night, the father and daughter's life does not change much. Every morning, they come to the shore. Willa is responsible for collecting clean spring water, while Luke carefully maintains the landmines buried in the sand. Once the work is done, the pair sits on the rocks and observes the otherworldly creatures on the opposite shore. Fortunately, that group of monsters still dare not enter the water at this stage, so the island is currently safe. After confirming there are no threats on the shore, Luke takes Willa into the woods to start high-intensity training sessions. Days pass like this, and just when Willa thinks she will spend the rest of her life on this island with her father, an accident suddenly happens. One morning, Willa goes to collect spring water as usual, but unexpectedly discovers a blurry human figure on the beach. She subconsciously shouts at the figure. The girl hears it and immediately turns, walking toward the source of the sound. But at this moment, Willa's expression becomes panicked because she suddenly remembers the landmines her father laid. She rushes to the beach, shouting loudly for the girl to stop. Fortunately, it was a close call and the girl did not trigger a mine. Only then does Willa realize the girl is about her age. Seeing the girl trembling with fear, Willa feels pity and takes her to her secret base, a hidden cave even her father doesn't know about. However, just as she lit a candle, Willa noticed a bleeding wound on the girl's forehead. The girl explains she might have bumped her head on the boat. Willa doesn't think too much of it. Even if it were a scratch from an otherworldly creature, it shouldn't be a major problem because, so far, the monsters only convert males into their own kind. After talking, Willa learns the girl's name is Rosie. She originally wanted to follow the coastline to visit her grandmother, but she didn't expect the monsters to have evolved the ability to swim. They suddenly emerged from the water and overturned her small boat. Rosie used all her strength to swim to this island. Learning that the monsters' habits have changed, Willa's heart sinks. She asks Rosie to stay in the cave first, wanting to go back and discuss it with her father, but just as she runs into the woods, a familiar figure suddenly rushes out from behind her. It is her mother, Milla. The mother and daughter hug tightly, and Willa weeps with joy. But before she can recover from the joy of reunion, Milla urgently lets go and urges Willa to leave the island with her. Seeing her mother turn to leave, Willa chases after her, saying she needs to notify her father first. However, before she finishes speaking, Milla screams hysterically.
Aren't you prepared? No matter how badass we may be.
Fortunately, this was just a dream, but the sense of reality leaves Willa with lingering fears. So, ignoring the sleeping Rosie, she runs all the way home. Luke thinks there is a monster invasion and immediately raises his gun at the door. Seeing it is Willa safe and sound, he lets his guard down. However, when her father asks why she came back so late, Willa subconsciously covers it up, lying that she overslept in the woods, not mentioning that she saved Rosie. Luke doesn't pry, but brings bad news. There are only a few jars of canned food left at home, and the harvest in the vegetable garden is unsatisfactory, barely enough to maintain the father and daughter's survival. Late at night, while Luke is asleep, Willa quietly walks to the table, stuffs all the remaining cans into her backpack, wanting to bring them to Rosie in the cave. However, remembering her father's constant hard work, she ultimately leaves one can behind before sneaking out of the house into the night. Seeing Rosie's condition improve, Willa can't help but smile happily. By the dim light, the two girls of the same age have endless topics to talk about, and Willa even shares her favorite book. Immersed in the joy of making a friend, she is completely unaware that Rosie keeps touching the wound on her forehead. After chatting for a while, it is time for Willa's training. Before leaving, she mimics her father and tells Rosie the heroic deeds of Kodiak, to encourage her not to give up hope, because there are countless warriors like Kodiak fighting in this world. So one day, humanity will successfully close that rift. However, on this day, while helping Willa train in combat skills, Luke suddenly faints without warning. It turns out he had long discovered the food at home was decreasing, but never pointed it out. He just silently reduced his own rations to save more food for his daughter. However, long-term hunger finally crushed Luke. When he wakes up from the coma, he looks at the anxious Willa, knowing clearly in his heart that his life is likely counting down. Willa looks at her father's weak appearance, her heart filled with regret and self-blame. She wants to leave the island, join the battlefield, and contribute her strength to the world, but Luke flatly refuses. He spent 5 years slaughtering on the battlefield and naturally knows the horror of those otherworldly creatures. If possible, he wants to protect Willa for a lifetime, but ultimately, it is a pipe dream. Thinking of this, Luke struggled to stand up and dug out a sharp sword from a wooden chest under the bed. That was the weapon he used when fighting alongside Milla back then. Now it is time to entrust it to Willa. Feeling the heavy weight in her hand, Willa seems to grow up overnight. She understands this is both a legacy and a responsibility. Early the next morning, Willa excitedly rushes to the cave with the sword, wanting to show Rosie her new weapon. But the cave is empty, the ground is a mess, and the things she brought before are all torn to shreds. Willa picks up the puppy doll with heartache, and while thinking about how to remedy the situation, a faint sound suddenly comes from behind her. She turns around vigilantly and walks carefully toward the sound, only to see Rosie squatting on the other side of the cave with her head down, not responding no matter how Willa calls.
Rosie?
Rosie has actually mutated into a hideous monster. Fear instantly floods Willa's heart. She tries desperately to break free from Rosie's grip, but the other's strength is astonishingly great, and her struggles are futile. Luckily, Luke arrives in time at the critical moment. But bullets hitting the monster only temporarily slow it down and cause no substantial damage. Seeing the monster charging at him, Luke draws his sword without a word and pierces the monster's head, resolving the immediate crisis. But just as he prepares to take his daughter and run, Willa suddenly cries in pain, believing she harmed Rosie. Luke quickly comforts her and then reveals even worse news. The infected monster sent a signal to the hive mind before dying. The location of this island is now exposed. They must evacuate immediately and find a new habitat.
Dad, I'm scared.
You let what scares you move you fall.
Meanwhile, movement comes from the distant sea surface. Monsters receiving the signal are swarming toward the island in groups. The father and daughter dare not delay and turn to run to the other side of the island where their fishing boat is docked. However, halfway there, Luke, with his bad leg, can no longer support himself, and Willa has to help him sit down to rest. Fortunately, they are not far from the coast, only another 5 minutes to the destination. Seeing Willa still immersed in self-blame, Luke gently pats her head and asks if she wants to hear a story. Unexpectedly this time, Willa says she doesn't want to hear about Kodiak's deeds anymore, but wants her father to tell the story of him and her mother. Luke is surprised but holds Willa in his arms and talks about how he and Milla met and fell in love. At that time, humans were already at war with otherworldly creatures and the whole city was reduced to ruins, but they still felt very happy. Although the world was shrouded in darkness, in Luke's eyes, Milla's smile was comparable to sunshine and worthy of any beautiful word. Their love was indestructible. So even now with no news from Milla, Luke firmly believes she is still alive, and one day they will reunite. Willa listens quietly to her father's story, unknowingly relaxing her vigilance. But soon, the roars of monsters break the silence. The father and daughter quickly stand up and sprint toward the coast. But they didn't expect a difficult chasm to be on their only path. Although a tree trunk spans across it, the narrow log is difficult even for one person to cross, let alone Luke with his bad leg. Hearing the approaching roars, Luke urges Willa to go first. Fortunately, her sense of balance was excellent, and she effortlessly made her way to the other side. But unexpectedly, a mutant catches up and tackles Luke directly, viciously biting his neck. Seeing this, Willa rushes back to the other side and draws the sword to chop off the mutant's head. But she never expected that even with the head severed, the residual nerves could still manipulate the body to move. Willa can only frantically defend with the sword, but is eventually forced onto the single log bridge. Fortunately, in the nick of time, Luke kills the monster completely from behind. Confirming Willa has no wounds, the father and daughter immediately speed up, running for their lives toward the fishing boat with all their might. But just as they run into the pine forest by the coast, Luke collapses to the ground, unable to hold on. Just then, another mutant chases them. Seeing the aggressive enemy, Willa overcomes her fear again, draws her sword, and assumes a fighting stance. For her father's safety, she absolutely cannot retreat. Looking at his completely transformed daughter, Luke finally reveals a proud smile. He believes that even without him in the future, Willa can survive in this chaotic world. Minutes later, the father and daughter finally stumble to the coast. Luke grabs Willa's shoulder, his voice urgent but with unquestionable firmness, telling her to cut the rope securing the fishing boat and leave the island, heading north. About 10 kilometers away is another uninhabited island where she can hide temporarily. But Willa senses something unusual in his tone. An intense unease instantly wells up from the bottom of her heart. She suddenly realizes her father does not intend to leave with her. Facing Willa's questions, Luke simply opens his collar, revealing a bloody and mangled shoulder. He has been infected by the mutant and will soon turn into a monster. Tears instantly blur Willa's vision. She refuses to leave her father and escape alone. But Luke gently wipes away her tears and comforts her softly, saying that although this world is broken, as long as she lives, she will eventually wait for the day of victory. As soon as he finishes speaking, the roar of monsters is close at hand. Luke immediately pushes Willa and sternly urges her to leave. Helpless, Willa has to turn and run toward the fishing boat, using the sword in her hand to cut the mooring rope. However, the expected scene of the boat sliding does not appear. The dilapidated tracks have long been rusty and stuck firmly to the shore. No matter how hard she pushes, the fishing boat remains motionless. At this time, Luke's body has already begun to mutate. He shakes violently, obviously unable to hold on, and uses his last bit of strength to look deeply at Willa, wanting to remember her face forever. Willa also realizes she has no hope of escape, so she decisively draws her sword, ready to fight to the death with the monsters. Unexpectedly, the roar of engines suddenly came from the sea surface. It was her mother, Milla, rushing over with the army. Willa instantly rekindles her hope. She exchanges a look with her father, then mimics her mother, scratching a mark on the ground with her sword, symbolizing her determination to fight to the end. This concludes the movie. This film blends alien invasion and island survival settings on a post-apocalyptic foundation. It has both the oppressive feel of the doomsday genre and the tension of a confined space. It is definitely a satisfying apocalyptic movie worth watching recently. Interested friends can check out the original film.